Captain Sarah Chen stared at the massive alien ship blocking their path through space. The human vessel Pioneer's Dream looked like a tiny insect next to the gray metal giant that had appeared without warning. Red warning lights flashed across her bridge as the communications officer turned toward her with wide eyes. "Captain, they're sending us a message," Lieutenant Park said, his voice shaking slightly. "But it's not in any language we know." Sarah nodded and straightened her uniform. This was the moment humanity had both hoped for and feared since they first reached the stars. First contact with alien life. She had dreamed of this day since she was a child, but now that it was here, her mouth felt dry. "Put it through the translation computer," she ordered. "Let's see what they want." The main screen flickered, and a strange face appeared. The alien had gray skin, 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and a mouth that seemed too wide for its head. When it spoke, the computer's voice came through in broken English. "Small ship of unknown species. You travel in space belonging to Hegemony Coalition. State your purpose or face destruction." Sarah took a deep breath. The alien's tone was cold and threatening, like someone talking to an annoying insect. She pressed the communication button and tried to keep her voice steady. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Pioneer's Dream. We come in peace. We are explorers from a planet called Earth, seeking contact with other intelligent life." The alien's 4 eyes blinked in what might have been surprise or boredom. "Earth? Never heard of this place. Your ship uses primitive fusion engines. Your weapons are simple projectiles. Your technology is old and weak." The alien leaned back in what looked like a command chair. Behind him, Sarah could see other alien creatures moving around a bridge much larger than hers. Everything about their ship looked advanced and powerful compared to her small exploration vessel. "I am Commander Vextar of the Krillian Empire, part of the mighty Hegemony Coalition. For over 10,000 of your years, we have ruled this galaxy. We decide who lives and who dies among the stars." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. 10,000 years. Humanity had only been in space for less than 2 centuries. These aliens had been building their empire since before humans discovered fire. "We don't want any trouble," Sarah said. "We just want to learn and explore. Maybe we can trade knowledge and become friends." Vexitar made a sound that the computer translated as laughter, but it sounded more like metal scraping against metal. "Friends? You think the mighty hegemony makes friends with creatures who barely crawl between stars? Your fastest ships take months to travel distances we cross in days." This was true, and Sarah knew it. Human ships could only travel at about 1/10 the speed of light. Even their newest vessels took years to reach nearby star systems. If these aliens had been traveling space for 10,000 years, their technology must be incredibly advanced. "However," Vextar continued, "the hegemony is not without mercy. Your species shows promise as workers. You build things with your hands and you follow orders when properly trained. Perhaps you can be useful." The alien commander touched something on his chair, and a star map appeared on Sarah's screen. A small section at the edge of known space was highlighted in green. "You may establish a colony in System 7742 Beta. It is a worthless place with old planets and dying stars, but it will be enough for your kind. You will mine metals and crystals for the hegemony. In return, we will protect you from other species who might destroy you for sport." Sarah looked at her crew. Their faces showed the same mixture of fear and anger she felt. This alien was talking about humanity like they were pets or farm animals. But what choice did they have? One alien ship was clearly more powerful than anything humanity could build. "What if we refuse?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Vexitar's wide mouth stretched in what might have been a smile. "Then your species joins the long list of others who thought they were too proud to serve. We have weapons that can turn your sun into a cold rock. We have fleets that number in the millions. Your entire species would be gone in less than 1 rotation of your planet." The alien commander stood up from his chair. "You have 7 of your days to move your people to System 7742 Beta. Any human ships found outside that area after the deadline will be destroyed without warning. Any attempt to contact other species will result in the complete elimination of your race." Sarah wanted to argue, to fight, to tell this alien exactly what she thought of his threats. But she had a responsibility to her crew and to all humanity. Starting a war they could not win would doom everyone she had ever loved. "We understand," she said, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. "We will comply with your demands." Vextar nodded as if he had expected nothing else. "Good. The hegemony keeps records of all species in our territory. Humans are now classified as Category 7, negligible threat, limited utility. You will be contacted when your services are required." The alien ship disappeared as quickly as it had arrived, leaving the pioneer's dream alone in empty space. Sarah stood in silence for a long moment, watching the stars that no longer seemed friendly and full of promise. "Captain," Lieutenant Park asked quietly, "what do we do now?" Sarah turned back to her crew. They were looking at her with hope and trust, believing she could somehow fix this terrible situation. She wished she had answers, but all she had were questions and a burning anger in her chest. "We go home," she said finally. "We warn Earth about what's out here, and we start preparing for the future." As the pioneer's dream turned toward Earth, Sarah made herself a promise. Humanity would not remain Category 7 forever. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she could almost hear the voices of human scientists and engineers working in secret laboratories, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The hegemony thought they knew everything about human technology. They had seen fusion engines and projectile weapons and assumed that was all humanity could achieve. But Sarah knew something the aliens did not. Humans were at their most dangerous when someone told them they were weak. The aliens had made their first mistake. They had underestimated the species that once looked at the impossible task of reaching the moon and decided to do it anyway. The species that had survived ice ages and plagues and wars, always finding a way to grow stronger. Commander Vextar returned to his ship believing he had solved a minor problem. In his official report, he would write that the humans were adequately primitive and unlikely to cause future difficulties. The Hegemony Council would file the report without reading it, trusting that their commanders knew how to handle insignificant species. None of them realized they had just made first contact with the most stubborn and innovative species in the galaxy. None of them understood that telling a human something was impossible was the fastest way to make them prove you wrong. The countdown to humanity's rise had begun, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. Dr. Elena Vasquez floated in the zero gravity of Research Station Prometheus, hidden deep within the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Outside the reinforced windows, she could see the rocky surface of asteroid 2157 Ceres rotating slowly in the darkness. No alien ship would ever think to look for humanity's greatest secret in this forgotten corner of space. "Elena, you need to see this," called Dr. James Wright from across the laboratory. His voice carried the excitement that had been building among the research team for months. "The containment field is holding perfectly. We're at 96% efficiency." Elena pushed off from the wall and glided over to James's workstation. On the screen, she could see the impossible made real, a sphere of pure antimatter contained within a magnetic field so precise that it could hold the most dangerous substance in the universe without letting a single particle escape. "How long has it been stable?" Elena asked, checking the readings herself. Even after 5 years of working on this project, she still felt amazed every time she looked at their creation. 47 hours and counting, James replied. "The new magnetic bottle design is working better than we ever hoped. We could power a ship the size of a space station with this much antimatter." Elena nodded, but her expression remained serious. "Power is only half the problem. We still need to solve propulsion. The hegemony controls all the hyperspace gates in the galaxy. Even if we build the fastest ships in known space, we'll still be trapped in our little corner unless we can travel without their permission." This had been their biggest challenge since Project Prometheus began. When Captain Chen returned from her encounter with Commander Vextar, the Earth government had quietly gathered their best scientists and given them unlimited funding for one goal: find a way to level the playing field with alien technology. At first, they had tried to improve fusion engines and build better weapons. But every breakthrough they made was still centuries behind what the hegemony possessed. It was Dr. Vasquez who first suggested they stop trying to copy alien technology and instead pursue the one path no other species had mastered: antimatter. "Actually," said a new voice from the laboratory entrance, I might have some good news about that. Elena turned to see Dr. Yuki Tanaka floating through the doorway, her tablet in hand and a huge grin on her face. Yuki was their theoretical physics expert, the woman who turned impossible ideas into mathematical equations. Please tell me you've solved faster-than-light travel, Elena said with a tired smile. They had been working 18-hour days for weeks, and everyone was feeling the pressure. Better than that, Yuki replied, pushing off the wall to join them at the workstation. I think I've figured out how to fold space-time itself. No hyperspace gates required. James nearly dropped his tablet. That's impossible. The energy requirements would be enormous. You'd need the power output of an entire star. Yuki's grin grew even wider. Unless you had a concentrated source of the most powerful energy in the universe, like, say, a few grams of antimatter reacting with matter in a controlled explosion. Elena felt her heart start beating faster. Show me. Yuki activated a holographic display that filled the air between them with complex mathematical formulas and diagrams. The hegemony uses hyperspace because they think it's the only way to travel faster than light. But hyperspace is like using a highway. You have to use the roads someone else built, and you can only go where the roads lead. She manipulated the display, showing a representation of normal space-time as a flat sheet. But what if instead of going around the mountain, you could fold the map so that two distant points touched each other? What if you could create a temporary wormhole that connects any 2 points in space? Elena stared at the equations floating in front of her. The mathematics were incredibly complex, but the basic concept was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of traveling through space, they would compress space itself. The power requirements? James asked, still looking skeptical. Massive, but not impossible, Yuki replied. A single gram of antimatter contains as much energy as 23 tons of TNT. If we could channel that energy through the right kind of space-time manipulation field, we could appear anywhere in the galaxy instantly, Elena finished. No hyperspace gates, no predetermined routes, no way for the hegemony to track or stop us. The three scientists floated in silence for a moment, understanding the implications of what they were discussing. This wasn't just a new type of engine or weapon. This was technology that would completely change the balance of power in the galaxy. How long would it take to build a prototype? Elena asked. Yuki checked her tablet. If we convert Bay 7 into a testing area and use the fabricators at full capacity, maybe 6 months for a small-scale version. Another year to build something large enough to move a real spacecraft? Elena thought about the timeline. It had been 8 months since Captain Chen's encounter with the hegemony. Earth's new colony in System 7742 Beta was growing slowly, with human ships carrying supplies and personnel under the watchful eyes of alien patrols. The hegemony believed they had solved the human problem and turned their attention to other matters. Do it, Elena said. But keep this information on a need-to-know basis. If the hegemony discovers what we're working on before we're ready, they'll eliminate us immediately, James finished. I know. We've all seen the intelligence reports about what happened to the Zelani species when they tried to build unauthorized weapons. Elena pulled up another holographic display showing the current status of human space. Their official territory was a single star system with 3 barely habitable planets. Human ships moved slowly between Earth and the colony, carrying mining equipment and basic supplies. To any alien observer, humanity looked exactly like what Commander Vextar had classified them as, a primitive species suitable only for manual labor. But hidden in asteroid fields and on the dark sides of moons, human engineers were building something the galaxy had never seen before. Secret facilities like Prometheus Station were scattered throughout human space, each working on a different piece of the puzzle. The first test ship should be ready in 2 months, Elena said, making notes on her tablet. We'll need a volunteer crew for the initial trials. Already taken care of, James replied. Captain Torres and his team from the Defiance Project have been training for months. They know the risks. Elena nodded. Captain Marcus Torres was a former military pilot who had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment in human space, testing experimental spacecraft that might explode, disappear into other dimensions, or simply cease to exist if the calculations were wrong. What about the hegemony? Yuki asked. They monitor all ship movements in our system. How do we test a space-folding drive without them noticing? We don't, Elena replied. "We test it in deep space, far from any surveillance. The first test will be a one-way trip to the edge of our solar system. If it works, Captain Torres will fold space again to return home. If it doesn't work—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. They all understood that the first test of humanity's greatest weapon might also be the last flight of its first test crew. "There's something else," Yuki said quietly. "If this technology works, it won't just change how we travel. It will change how we fight. A ship that can appear anywhere without warning, strike without being detected, and disappear before the enemy can respond would be the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy," Elena agreed. "Which is why we need to be very careful about how we use it." Outside the laboratory windows, the stars looked the same as they always had. But Elena knew that within a year those stars would no longer be beyond human reach. The species that the hegemony had dismissed as negligible threat was about to become the most powerful force in known space. The aliens thought they knew everything about human capabilities because they had seen human technology. But they had never seen human determination. They had never witnessed what happened when humanity decided that the impossible was simply another problem to solve. Fleet Admiral Zexthul of the Hegemony Navy stared at the report on his desk with growing confusion. The document contained surveillance data from the past 3 months, and something about human ship movements didn't make sense. "Computer, display. Human vessel tracking data for the last 90 rotations," he commanded. The holographic display above his desk lit up with a map of human territory and the surrounding space. Zexthul was a Korthax, a species that had joined the hegemony over 4,000 years ago. His people were known for their attention to detail and their ability to spot patterns that others missed. Right now, those skills were telling him that something was very wrong with the human situation. "Show me the timeline for human ship Hermes," he said, pointing at one of the data points. The display zoomed in on the ship's recorded positions. According to hegemony monitoring stations, the Hermes had been detected leaving Earth's system on day 47. On day 49, it had appeared at the human colony in System 7742 Beta. On day 52, it was back at Earth. On day 54, it was somehow at the mining station near Proxima Centauri. Zexthul's 4 eyes narrowed as he calculated travel times. Even with the best hegemony technology, that journey should have taken at least 15 days. The humans were using primitive fusion engines that moved at a fraction of light speed. The trip from Earth to their colony alone should have taken them 6 days minimum. "Computer, check for errors in the surveillance data," he ordered. "No errors detected," the computer replied. "All timestamps and identification signatures have been verified through multiple sensor networks." Zexthul leaned back in his chair. Either his surveillance network was completely broken, or the humans had somehow gained access to technology that allowed them to travel much faster than their ships should be capable of. "Display travel patterns for all human vessels over the past 90 rotations," he commanded. The hologram expanded to show the movements of dozens of human ships. As Zexthul studied the data, the pattern became clear. Human vessels were consistently arriving at destinations days ahead of when they should be possible. More disturbing, they were appearing in systems where no hyperspace gates existed. The hegemony's control of the galaxy was based on their monopoly of hyperspace travel. They had built the gates and controlled access to them. Any species that wanted to travel between star systems had to use hegemony routes and pay hegemony fees. It was the foundation of their empire. But the humans seemed to be bypassing the hyperspace network entirely. Zexthul activated his communication system and contacted Commander Vextar, who was overseeing human compliance from his patrol ship in the outer system. "Vextar, I need you to explain something to me," Zexthul said when the Krillian commander appeared on his screen. "How are human ships reaching destinations faster than their technology should allow?" Vextar's expression showed confusion. "I don't understand, Admiral. Human ships are slow and primitive. They barely crawl between their planets." "Then explain this." Zexthul transmitted the surveillance data to Vextar's ship. "According to our sensors, human vessels are moving at impossible speeds and appearing in locations without using hyperspace gates." Vextar studied the data for several minutes. When he looked up, his 4 eyes showed uncertainty. "Perhaps they have stolen some of our technology. A few hyperspace generators could explain the increased speed." Stolen technology doesn't explain how they're appearing in systems with no hyperspace access, Zexthul replied. And our intelligence network would have detected any theft of hegemony equipment. The two commanders discussed the situation for another hour, but neither could find a satisfactory explanation. Finally, Zexthul decided to take direct action. Send a message to the human leadership, he ordered. Tell them that Ambassador Park and his diplomatic team are to report to Hegemony Central Command within 10 rotations. I want to question them personally about their recent activities. Meanwhile, in the lawless sectors at the edge of hegemony space, word of human ship movements was spreading among criminals and independent traders. Captain Yix, a smuggler from the Vorthon species, sat in a bar on the space station Freeport, listening to rumors and putting together pieces of a very interesting puzzle. I'm telling you, the humans are using some kind of new technology, said Corin, a pirate who specialized in robbing cargo ships. My crew tried to intercept one of their transports last week. We set up an ambush at the usual hyperspace exit point, but the human ship never showed up there. Instead, it appeared right next to the station they were delivering to, like it had teleported. Yix sipped his drink and pretended not to be too interested. But inside, his mind was racing. For decades, he had made his living by avoiding hegemony patrols and sneaking cargo through systems where it wasn't supposed to go. The key to successful smuggling was knowing routes that the authorities didn't monitor. But if humans had found a way to travel without using hyperspace gates, that changed everything. A smuggler who could appear anywhere without warning would be worth a fortune to the right clients. Maybe I should pay these humans a visit, Yix thought to himself. Back at Hegemony Central Command, Admiral Zexthul received a priority message from his communication center. Admiral, we have an incoming transmission from the human diplomatic vessel. They say Ambassador Park is ready to meet with you. Already? Zexthul checked his chronometer. But I only sent the message 6 hours ago. Their ship couldn't possibly have received it and traveled here that quickly. Sir, they're requesting permission to dock at Base 7, the communications officer reported. Zexthul hurried to the observation deck that overlooked the main docking bays. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see a sleek human vessel settling onto the landing platform. The ship's design was different from previous human vessels he had seen, more streamlined and elegant. Computer, check the arrival logs, he commanded. When did that ship first appear on our sensors? The vessel Diplomatic Dawn first appeared. On sensors 4 minutes ago, Admiral. No hyperspace emergent signature was detected. Zexthul felt a chill run down his spine. Hyperspace travel always produced a distinctive energy signature when ships transitioned back into normal space. Every ship in the galaxy produced this signature except for one class of vessel. Experimental hegemony stealth ships that cost more to build than most planets were worth. Either the humans had somehow acquired the most advanced technology in the hegemony arsenal, or they had developed something even better. An hour later, Admiral Zexthul sat across from Ambassador David Park in the secure meeting room of Central Command. The human diplomat was a middle-aged man with graying hair and calm eyes that seemed to see everything. Ambassador Park, Zexthul began, I have questions about recent human activities. Our sensors indicate that your ships are traveling much faster than should be possible with your technology. Park smiled politely. Admiral, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for any confusion in your sensor data. Human engineering is constantly improving. We're an ambitious species. Your ship arrived here in less than 6 hours after receiving my message, Zexthul pressed. That's impossible unless you were already in this system or you have access to technology we don't know about. Perhaps your sensors need calibration, Park replied smoothly. Or perhaps you underestimated human capabilities when you first classified our species. The two continued their discussion for another hour, but Park revealed nothing useful. He answered every question politely, but provided no real information about how human ships were achieving their impossible travel times. Finally, Zexthul decided to make the situation clear. Ambassador, the hegemony is prepared to offer humanity a more favorable arrangement, better mining quotas, access to some of our older technologies, even limited trading rights. In exchange, we need to understand exactly how your ships are moving. Through space. Park leaned back in his chair and studied the alien admiral for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was still polite, but there was something new underneath it, something that sounded almost like confidence. Admiral Zexthul, I appreciate the generous offer, but humanity is no longer interested in accepting a subordinate position in the galaxy. We believe it's time for a new arrangement, one based on mutual respect between equals. Zexthul's expression hardened. Equals? Ambassador, I think you misunderstand your species' position. The hegemony has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. We have fleets that number in the millions and weapons that can destroy stars. Humanity has a few dozen ships and some mining colonies. Park stood up from his chair and straightened his diplomatic uniform. Admiral, with respect, I think it's you who misunderstands the current situation. Humanity has grown beyond what you observed during our first contact. We're no longer the same species you classified as negligible threat. Are you threatening the hegemony? Zexthul asked, his voice becoming dangerously quiet. Not at all, Park replied. I'm simply informing you that humanity is ready to take its place as a full member of the galactic community. We hope this transition can be peaceful and mutually beneficial. Zexthul stood as well, his 4 eyes blazing with anger. Ambassador, you have 30 rotations to reconsider your position. If humanity continues to refuse hegemony authority, we will be forced to take corrective action. Battle Commander Rexthul stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought Inevitable Dominion and watched the greatest fleet in hegemony history prepare for battle. Through the observation windows, he could see hundreds of warships stretching out in all directions, cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and support vessels that represented the combined military might of a dozen alien species. Warfleet Omega contained 300 of the most advanced ships in the galaxy, crewed by over 2 million of the hegemony's best warriors. It was a force designed to crush entire civilizations and make examples that would be remembered for centuries. Commander, reported his tactical officer, a thin Zalathi with 6 arms that moved constantly across multiple control panels. All ships report ready for hyperspace jump. Fleet formation is optimal. Rexthul nodded with satisfaction. The humans had refused the hegemony's final offer and had somehow convinced themselves they could stand against an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Today would teach them the price of such arrogance. Begin jump sequence, he ordered. Target, Sol system, home of the human species. All ships will emerge in attack formation around the 3rd planet. The space around Warfleet Omega shimmered as hundreds of ships activated their hyperspace drives simultaneously. Reality twisted. Colors that had no names flashed across the void. And then the fleet was gone. Moments later, they emerged from hyperspace in Earth's solar system. Rexthul immediately activated his sensor arrays to locate human ships and orbital defenses. The tactical display lit up with data as his instruments scanned the system. Then Rexthul stared at the display in confusion. Tactical officer, he said slowly, where are the human ships? The Zalathi's 6 arms moved frantically across his controls. Commander, I'm detecting no active vessels in the system, no orbital platforms, no defense satellites, no military installations. What about their colonies? Their mining stations? Rexthul demanded. All appear to be abandoned, sir. I'm reading minimal life signs on the planet's surface, but no organized resistance. Rexthul activated the main view screen and looked at Earth floating peacefully in space below them. The planet looked exactly as it had in intelligence reports. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. But there were no ships rising to meet his fleet. No desperate radio transmissions. No signs of the panic and terror that should greet the arrival of an overwhelming enemy force. Run a deep scan of the entire system, he ordered. Check every moon, every asteroid, every piece of space debris large enough to hide a ship. The scan took 2 hours and revealed nothing. The Sol system, which intelligence reports said contained over 50 human vessels and multiple space stations, was completely empty of any military presence. Commander, the tactical officer reported, I believe the humans detected our approach and fled the system. There are traces of recent engine activity near several planets, but all ships appear to have departed within the last rotation. Rexthul allowed himself a smile of satisfaction. Cowards. They saw the might of Warfleet Omega and ran like frightened animals. Send a message to all ships. Begin occupation procedures. Establish orbital control around the major planets and deploy garrison forces to the surface. Within hours, hegemony forces had taken control of Earth's major cities and space installations. The few humans who remained on the planet offered no resistance. Mostly elderly people and essential maintenance workers who claimed they knew nothing about where the rest of their species had gone. Rexthul sent his victory report to Hegemony. Central Command. Human military forces have fled before the superior might of Warfleet Omega. Sol system secured with no casualties. Human resistance has collapsed completely. But even as he transmitted his report, events were already in motion that would make his message the last communication Warfleet Omega would ever send. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Antimatter-Powered. Dreadnought Terra's resolve and watched the holographic display showing hegemony positions throughout the galaxy. Red dots marked the locations of major alien fleets, military installations, and government centers. There were hundreds of targets spread across thousands of light years. All task forces report ready, announced Commander Torres, who had been promoted after successfully testing humanity's space-folding technology. Operation Checkmate can begin at your command, Captain. Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew. These were the same people who had been powerless to resist Commander Vextar's threats just 2 years ago. Now they commanded technology that made hegemony hyperspace travel look like a horse and cart. Begin Operation Checkmate, Sarah ordered. All task forces, execute simultaneous strike. Throughout human space, 30 battle fleets activated their antimatter drives and folded space-time around their ships. In an instant, they were gone. Admiral Zexthul was reviewing fleet dispositions in his office when every alarm on Hegemony Central Command began screaming at once. He rushed to the main command center to find his staff in chaos. "Report!" he shouted over the noise. "Admiral, we're receiving priority alerts from military installations throughout the galaxy," his operations officer replied, his voice shaking with disbelief. "Korthax Prime reports human ships in orbit. The Zelathi shipyards are under attack. The fortress at Rigel 7 is sending distress signals." Zexthul stared at the tactical display as red warning lights appeared at dozens of locations. "That's impossible. Human ships can't be at all those locations simultaneously. They don't have enough vessels, and they can't travel that fast." "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from human ships in orbit around this station. They're demanding our surrender." "Show me," Zexthul ordered. The main screen lit up with an image that made Zexthul's 4 eyes widen in shock. Dozens of sleek human warships hung in space around Central Command, their weapons pointed directly at the station. The ships looked nothing like the primitive vessels he had seen in intelligence reports. These were clearly built for war, with antimatter cannons that glowed with barely contained energy. Captain Chen's face appeared on the communication screen. "Admiral Zexthul, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. Your military installations throughout this sector are currently surrounded by human battle fleets. You have 10 minutes to order the complete surrender of all hegemony forces, or we will begin destroying your ships." "This is impossible," Zexthul whispered. "You can't be in all these places at once. Your technology doesn't allow for such coordination." Sarah's expression remained calm. "Admiral, I think you'll find that your intelligence about human capabilities is significantly out of date. We're no longer the same species you dismissed as negligible threat." Zexthul activated his fleet communication system, trying to contact Warfleet Omega at Earth. Static answered him. He tried to reach the fortress at Alpha Centauri. More static. Every major hegemony installation in the sector had gone silent. "How?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Antimatter weapons and space-folding technology," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "While your species spent 10,000 years perfecting hyperspace travel, humanity took a different approach. We learned to fold space itself, allowing us to appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Your entire strategic doctrine, built around controlling hyperspace lanes, became obsolete the moment we perfected our drives." On tactical displays throughout the galaxy, hegemony commanders were watching the impossible happen. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking targets and vanishing before defensive fire could be brought to bear. Weapons designed to penetrate the strongest known shields were useless against armor powered by antimatter energy. The fortress at Vega Prime, which had never fallen in 3,000 years of warfare, was destroyed in less than 5 minutes. The Korthax home fleet, pride of the hegemony navy, was disabled by weapons that burned through their hulls like paper. Commander Vextar, still patrolling the empty Sol system, received an emergency message from his home world. Human ships had appeared in orbit around Krill and were demanding the surrender of all military forces. His own species' capital was being held hostage while he sat uselessly in an abandoned star system. "All ships," he broadcast to the remnants of Warfleet Omega, "return to home sectors immediately. We have been deceived about human capabilities, but it was already too late." As hegemony ships tried to activate their hyperspace drives to respond to the crisis, they found human vessels waiting for them at every hyperspace exit point. The aliens had built their entire military strategy around the assumption that they controlled galactic transportation. Now that assumption was destroying them. Rex Thul watched in horror as his great fleet was systematically hunted down by enemies who could appear anywhere without warning. Ships that tried to flee found human forces waiting for them. Ships that tried to fight discovered that their weapons could barely scratch armor powered by antimatter reactions. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, all 6 arms shaking with fear, "we've lost contact with over 60% of the fleet. The remaining ships are scattered and requesting orders." Rex Thul looked at the tactical display showing the destruction of the most powerful military force in galactic history. President Maria Santos stood at the podium aboard the massive space station New Geneva, humanity's new capital in the heart of what had once been hegemony space. Around her, representatives from over 300 species sat in curved rows, their various forms of communication equipment translating her words into thousands of languages. 6 months had passed since the collapse of the Hegemony Coalition, and the galaxy was still adjusting to its new reality. Today's gathering would determine whether that reality led to peace or chaos. "Fellow citizens of the galaxy," President Santos began, her voice carrying clearly through the advanced sound systems, "we gather today not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals working together to build a better future." In the front row, Admiral Zexthul listened to the translation through his personal communicator. The former hegemony commander had spent the last 6 months in what humans called protective custody, helping to coordinate the peaceful transition of power. He still found it hard to believe that his captors treated him with more respect than his own government ever had. "The hegemony fell because it was built on fear and oppression," Santos continued. "It survived by convincing species that they were too weak to govern themselves, too primitive to master advanced technology, too divided to work together. Today, we prove all of those assumptions wrong." Behind the president, a holographic display showed the new galactic map. Green zones marked areas where former hegemony slaves had established their own governments. Blue zones showed regions under direct human administration until local populations could organize themselves. Red zones marked the few remaining areas where hegemony loyalists continued to resist. Dr. Elena Vasquez sat in the observer section, watching the proceedings with satisfaction. The antimatter technology that had won the war was now being shared freely with any species that wanted to learn it. Human engineers worked alongside alien scientists, teaching the principles of space-folding travel and antimatter containment to beings whose ancestors had been building starships when humans were still discovering fire. The old system required everyone to use technology controlled by a few, President Santos explained. The new system gives everyone access to the tools they need to reach the stars on their own terms. In the back of the chamber, Captain Yix translated the president's words for a group of independent traders. The Vorthon smuggler had become an unofficial representative for the galaxy's criminal organizations, most of which had transformed themselves into legitimate shipping companies once the hegemony's oppressive trade laws were eliminated. "She's actually doing it," Yix whispered to his companions. "They're really giving antimatter technology to everyone. Do you know what this means for trade, for exploration, for freedom of movement?" Ambassador David Park, now serving as humanity's Secretary of Galactic Affairs, stepped forward to address specific concerns. "I know many of you are worried about the concentration of power in human hands," he said. "You've seen what happened. When one species controlled galactic civilization, you're right to be concerned." Park activated a new holographic display showing the structure of the proposed Galactic Federation. "That's why humanity is proposing to limit our own authority. We will serve as coordinators and advisors for the next 50 years, helping to establish democratic institutions and economic systems. After that period, leadership of the Federation will rotate among member species based on democratic elections. Former Commander Vextar, sitting in the section reserved for former hegemony officials, listened with amazement. In all his years of service to the old empire, he had never heard a ruling species voluntarily give up power. Yet here were the humans, the most dominant force in galactic history, promising to step back and let others lead. "Many of you have asked about defense," President Santos said, addressing one of the most common concerns. "How do we protect ourselves from future threats without recreating the military oppression of the hegemony?" Captain Sarah Chen, now commanding the Federation Defense Force, stood to answer. "Every species that joins the Federation will have access to antimatter technology and space-folding drives. Every world will be able to defend itself. But more importantly, every species will have a voice in decisions about military action. Never again will a few leaders be able to drag the galaxy into war." The discussion continued for hours as representatives asked questions about trade, law enforcement, resource distribution, and territorial boundaries. Human officials answered each concern with detailed proposals that had been developed in consultation with representatives from dozens of species. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, now leading the Federation Science Council, explained how research and development would be coordinated. "Instead of hoarding technology for military advantage, we'll share discoveries to benefit everyone. The hegemony stagnated because they were afraid of change. The Federation will thrive because we embrace it." As the formal session ended, smaller groups gathered to discuss specific agreements. Admiral Zexthul found himself approached by Captain Chen, the human who had defeated his mighty fleet. "Admiral," Chen said politely, "I wanted to thank you for your help during the transition. Your knowledge of hegemony systems has been invaluable in keeping the peace." Zexthul studied the human captain with his 4 eyes. "I must ask, Captain, why are you treating your former enemies so well? In the old days, defeated species were enslaved or eliminated. Your people offer us partnership. Instead," Chen smiled, "because we learned something the hegemony never understood. Strength comes from cooperation, not domination. Every species has something valuable to contribute. The hegemony wasted that potential for 10,000 years. Across the station, similar conversations were taking place as former enemies worked together to build something new. Krillian engineers shared manufacturing techniques with human workers. Zalathi computer specialists helped develop translation systems that could handle hundreds of languages simultaneously. Korthak's administrators shared their experience in managing large-scale logistics. Captain Yix met with President Santos personally to discuss the concerns of independent traders and small business owners. "Madam President," he said, "my people are grateful for the freedom you've given us, but we're also worried. What happens when your people get tired of being generous? What stops you from becoming the new hegemony?" Santos appreciated the directness of the question. "Captain Yix, I won't pretend that some humans don't want to rule the galaxy permanently. Power is tempting and we're not perfect. That's why we're building institutions that can function without us. That's why we're sharing our most advanced technology freely. That's why we're setting up democratic systems that can remove us from power if we abuse it." She gestured toward the observation windows, where the lights of ships from hundreds of worlds could be seen coming and going from the station. "Look out there, Captain. Every one of those ships can now travel anywhere in the galaxy without asking permission from anyone. Every crew can carry weapons capable of destroying battle fleets. The galaxy is too free now to be enslaved again, even by us." Dr. Vasquez spent her days in the station's research facilities, working with scientists from dozens of species to push the boundaries of antimatter technology even further. The collaborative approach was producing breakthroughs at an unprecedented rate. Concepts that would have taken humanity decades to develop alone were being perfected in months with help from alien expertise. "We're not just sharing our technology," she explained to a group of young researchers. "We're learning from everyone else's approaches. The Vorthans have mathematics that makes our calculations more efficient. The Zalathi understand quantum mechanics in ways we never considered. Together, we're discovering things none of us could find alone." The first class of the Federation Academy graduated 6 months after the station opened. Young beings from hundreds of worlds had studied together, learning not just antimatter physics and space-folding theory, but also diplomacy, ethics, and the history of galactic civilization. They would return home as ambassadors for the new order, carrying both technology and ideals. President Santos spoke at their graduation ceremony. "You are the first generation to grow up in a free galaxy," she told them. "You've never known the way, fear and oppression that your parents lived under. Don't take that freedom for granted. Protect it, nurture it, and pass it on to those who come after you." Commander Torres, now an instructor at the academy, watched the graduation with pride. These young beings would pilot ships that could cross the galaxy in minutes, carry weapons that could crack planets, and access information networks that connected every civilized world. But more importantly, they had been taught to use that power responsibly. As the ceremony ended, a priority message arrived from the Deep Space Monitoring Station at the galaxy's edge. Long-range sensors had detected something unprecedented. Ships approaching from the direction of the Andromeda Galaxy, moving at speeds that suggested they had antimatter technology of their own. President Santos read the report with interest, rather than alarm. First contact with an extragalactic civilization would be the ultimate test of the Federation's principles. Would they meet these newcomers as equals, or would fear drive them back toward the old ways of the hegemony?